Hashtag the Galactic Empire welcomed Earth's ninja team. First Contact Commander Zextala's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she reviewed the transmission from the primitive world designated Terra 3. The bipedal creatures had somehow managed to intercept and decode their standard diplomatic frequency, responding with what their translation matrix identified as an acceptance of galactic citizenship. "Most unusual," she muttered, her crystalline voice resonating through the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion. A species achieving faster-than-light communication before space travel. How did they manage such a feat? Her aide, a nervous Quilorian with trembling tentacles, approached cautiously. "Ma'am, our xenobiological analysis suggests these humans possess remarkable adaptability. Their neural patterns show unprecedented complexity for a Class C civilization." ZYXDala's interest peaked. In her 3 centuries of service to the Galactic Empire, she had overseen the integration of 47 species. Most required decades of careful guidance before they could contribute meaningfully to galactic society. The standard protocol involved demonstrating imperial superiority, offering protection in exchange for resources and military service, then slowly elevating the most promising specimens to auxiliary status. "What form of governance do they employ?" she asked, manipulating the holographic display with practiced efficiency. "Fragmented nation-states, ma'am. However, they form a unified response through something called the United Nations. Their representative claims to speak for the entire species. Impressive coordination for primitives." ZYXDala leaned forward, her interest genuinely piqued. "What military capabilities do they possess?" The aide's tentacles writhed nervously. "Crude chemical explosives, basic projectile weapons, and something they call nuclear deterrent. Nothing that could threaten even our oldest patrol ships. Yet they offer military assistance." ZYXDala's laugh was like breaking crystal. "How charmingly presumptuous. What do they propose to contribute?" "They mention specialized combat units, trained in what they term unconventional warfare. Their transmission specifically highlights a group called Ninja Operatives." "Ninja?" ZYXDala rolled the unfamiliar word around her translator implant. "Define this term." The holographic display shifted, showing intercepted Earth transmissions and cultural data. Images of masked figures moving through shadows, ancient warriors scaling impossible walls, and demonstrations of remarkable physical prowess flickered before them. "Fascinating," ZYXDala mused. "Stealth specialists. The Empire does value such skills, though I suspect their primitive training falls far short of our Phantom Core standards." She had seen countless species attempt to impress the Empire with their warriors. The rock-skinned Durathi brought their mountain crushers. The insectoid Vex offered their poison assassins. The gaseous Nephilim presented their phase dancers. All had been humbled by imperial superiority and relegated to support roles. "Shall I prepare the standard integration protocols, Commander?" the aide asked. "Indeed. But first, let's examine one of these ninja operatives more closely. Arrange for a demonstration combat scenario. I'm curious to see what these humans consider elite warfare." 3 weeks later, the Imperial delegation materialized on Earth's surface outside the United Nations headquarters in New Geneva. ZYXDala had insisted on a personal evaluation, accompanied by a full diplomatic escort and 3 squads of her finest Phantom Corps operatives. The humans had insisted on neutrality for the meeting, but she knew the value of overwhelming displays of force. The human delegation awaited them in what appeared to be a hastily constructed ceremonial hall. ZYXDala noted the primitive architecture and crude atmospheric control systems with mild amusement. Secretary General Maria Santos stepped forward, flanked by military advisors from various Earth nations. "Commander ZYXDala, on behalf of humanity, we welcome you to Earth," Santos said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. "Secretary Santos," ZYXDala replied, allowing her translation implant to render her words in the local tongue. "The Empire acknowledges Terra's petition for membership. We are here to evaluate your proposed contributions to galactic security." The formal ceremonies proceeded predictably. Tours of human facilities, demonstrations of their technology, presentations of their cultural achievements. ZYXDala found them adequate, but unremarkable. Their art showed creativity, their science demonstrated potential, but nothing exceptional enough to warrant special consideration. Then, Santos introduced their military representatives. "Commander, I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Chun, our liaison for special operations," Santos said. "She'll be coordinating with your military assessments." Colonel Chun stepped forward, a compact woman with alert eyes and precise movements. Ziwa-Xtala's experienced gaze immediately cataloged her as a competent soldier, though clearly limited by human physiology. "Commander Ziwa-Xtala," Chun said with a respectful nod, "we're honored to demonstrate humanity's capabilities. When would you prefer to conduct the combat evaluation?" "Immediately," Ziwa-Xtala replied. "We have prepared a standard scenario. Your operative will face one of our Phantom Corps in simulated combat. Victory conditions include elimination, incapacitation, or tactical objective completion within one standard time period." Chin's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Understood. However, I should mention that our selected operative has some unique characteristics that might affect the parameters." "Oh," Ziwa-Xtala's interest sharpened. "Explain." "Kenji Nakamura, third-generation ninja master, trained from childhood in traditional and modern techniques. He served in conflict across 7 continents and has been involved in operations that officially never happened." Ziwa-Xtala waved dismissively. "Standard warrior class designation. What makes him unique?" Chun hesitated. "His confirmed elimination count, which is 1,437. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Ziwa-Xtala's aide dropped his datapad. Even her Phantom Corps escorts shifted uncomfortably. "Impossible," Ziwa-Xtala said finally. "No individual could achieve such numbers without support systems beyond your current technology." "That's what we thought too," Chun replied quietly, "until we reviewed his service record. Every mission verified, every elimination confirmed. He's not just a soldier, Commander. He's something else entirely." Ziwa-Xtala felt a chill run through her crystalline bones. In 3 centuries of military service, she had encountered warriors who could eliminate dozens, perhaps hundreds of enemies throughout their careers. But over 1,400 confirmed kills by a member of a primitive species? Either the humans were lying, or they were about to present something that would challenge everything she understood about combat effectiveness. "Where is this, Nakamura?" she asked. Chun smiled, and Ziwa-Xtala suddenly realized it was the first genuine emotion she had seen from any of the humans. "He's already here." Before Ziwa-Xtala could respond, the lights dimmed slightly. Her Phantom Corps escorts immediately went to alert status, their advanced sensors sweeping the area. She heard the faint whisper of movement, felt the displacement of air, and caught the briefest glimpse of shadow moving where no shadow should exist. Then, a voice spoke from directly behind her, so close she could feel breath on her neck. "Commander Ziwa-Xtala, I am Kenji Nakamura. When shall we begin?" She turned slowly, her 4 eyes widening in disbelief. A human male stood 3 feet away, dressed in form-fitting black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was partially concealed, but his eyes were visible, dark, calm, and utterly without fear. What truly shook her was the realization that none of her escort sensors had detected his approach. 3 squads of the Empire's finest stealth specialists, equipped with technology centuries beyond Earth capabilities, and this human had moved among them like they were blind and deaf children. "Ow," she whispered. Kenji's head tilted slightly. "Would you prefer a demonstration first, or should we proceed directly to the evaluation?" Ziwa-Xtala looked around the room. Her Phantom Corps operatives were scanning frantically, trying to understand how their systems had failed. The human delegation watched with expressions that mixed pride and anticipation. "Demonstration," she said, her voice barely steady. Kenji nodded once. "Please observe your escort on the left." Ziwa-Xtala turned toward the indicated Phantom Corps operative, a veteran named Thrixmore who had served the Empire for 6 decades. As she watched, Thrixmore suddenly stiffened, his hands moving to his throat. His emergency beacon activated, signaling immediate medical distress. "What did you dash?" Ziwa-Xtala began, then stopped as she saw Thrixmore remove a small metal object from his neck armor. A needle, impossibly thin, had somehow penetrated his battle suit's defenses and delivered a paralytic agent. She spun back toward Kenji, but He had vanished again. Temporary paralysis only. His voice came from somewhere above them. He'll recover fully in approximately 6 minutes. I wanted to demonstrate precision rather than lethality. The remaining Phantom Corps operatives had weapons drawn, their sensors sweeping desperately for target. Zyaxthala realized with growing horror that her finest specialists were being outclassed by a single primitive human. "Enough," she commanded. "Show yourself." Kenji materialized from what appeared to be empty air, standing in the exact center of the room. None of the sensors registered his presence, even when they could clearly see him. "How is this possible?" Zyaxthala demanded. "Our technology should detect any biological signature." "Your technology assumes certain parameters about stealth techniques," Kenji replied calmly. "It's designed to counter methods developed by space-faring civilizations. You've never encountered an opponent who learned to move unseen through sheer biological adaptation and centuries of refinement." Colonel Chun stepped forward. "Commander, ninja techniques were developed on a world where the slightest sound could mean death, where movement in perfect darkness was necessary for survival, where breathing, heartbeat, even body temperature had to be controlled to avoid detection. Your sensors are looking for technological signatures. They don't know how to interpret someone who has learned to become virtually invisible through pure physical discipline." Zyaxthala stared at the human called Kenji, her certainty about imperial superiority cracking like ice in a furnace. Everything she had believed about the relationship between technology and warfare was being challenged by a being who achieved the impossible through nothing but training and willpower. "Your kill count," she said finally. "Ow!" Kenji's eyes met hers directly. 1,437 confirmed eliminations across 32 years of active service. "Would you like me to detail the methods, or shall we proceed with your evaluation?" For the first time in her centuries of service, Commander Zyaxthala felt something she had never experienced when facing a primitive species: genuine apprehension about the outcome of a military engagement. The Galactic Empire welcomed Earth's ninja team. The test, the combat simulation chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion, represented the pinnacle of Imperial military technology. Holographic environments could recreate any battlefield from the Empire's vast databases, complete with environmental hazards, variable gravity, and atmospheric compositions lethal to most organic life forms. Energy barriers contained the participants while sensors monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every neural impulse. Commander Zyaxthala stood in the observation deck, surrounded by her senior staff and a growing crowd of Imperial officers who had heard whispers of the unusual evaluation. Below them, the chamber configured itself into a representation of Zirian Prime, a desolate world where the Empire's most challenging military exercises took place. Jagged crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, creating a maze of deadly obstacles that could slice through standard armor with minimal contact. Atmospherique composition. Zyaxthala asked her chief technician. Methane-nitrogen mix, toxic to most carbon-based life forms. Temperature set to -40 degrees Celsius. Gravity increased to 1.8 standard. The technician's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Commander, are you certain the human can survive these conditions?" Zyaxthala watched through the observation port as Kenji entered the chamber. The human wore only his strange black outfit and a basic atmospheric mask, no environmental suit, no armor, no visible weapons beyond what appeared to be simple metal implements attached to his belt. "He insisted on minimal protection," she murmured. Said additional equipment would interfere with his natural abilities. Her opponent was Vexthar, the finest Phantom Corps operative under her command. A Nexarian by species, he possessed natural chameleonic abilities enhanced by military-grade stealth technology that rendered him effectively invisible across most of the electromagnetic spectrum. His bioarmor could adapt to environmental extremes, and his weapon systems included plasma projectors capable of cutting through starship hull plating. "Vexthar's mission parameters?" she asked. "Standard elimination protocol. Locate and neutralize the target using any means necessary. Time limit, 1 standard hour." Zyaxthala nodded. She had selected Vexthar specifically because he had never failed a mission in 23 years of service. If anyone could demonstrate Imperial superiority, it would be him. The timer began. Immediately, Vexthar vanished from sight, his adaptive camouflage rendering him invisible to both naked eye and sensor sweep. HFY watched the sensor readouts, tracking his movement through the maze of crystal formations by the faint energy signature of his equipment. Kenji stood motionless in the center of the chamber. "Is the human frozen with fear?" asked Lieutenant Quindar, HFY's tactical specialist. "I don't think so," she replied, studying the readings. "His vital signs are remarkably stable. Heart rate, breathing, neural activity, all well within normal parameters for a relaxed human." Minutes passed. Vexthar had circled the chamber twice, using elevated positions and crystal cover to observe his target. The tactical display showed his optimal strike positions, calculated by the ship's combat computer to provide maximum advantage. Kenji hadn't moved. "Perhaps the primitive doesn't understand the scenario has begun," suggested another officer. As if responding to the comment, Kenji suddenly tilted his head slightly, like someone listening to a distant sound. Then, without warning, he dropped to the ground. A plasma bolt sizzled through the space where his head had been, striking a crystal formation and sending molten fragments scattering across the chamber floor. "Impossible," breathed Vexthar's voice through the comm system. "How did he detect my position? I haven't moved for 3 minutes." Kenji rolled sideways as another plasma burst scorched the ground beside him. Without appearing to look in any particular direction, he reached into his equipment belt and withdrew something too small to identify at this distance. The object flew through the air in an arc that seemed to defy the chamber's increased gravity. It struck one of the crystal formations with a sound like breaking glass, and suddenly, Vexthar became partially visible, his stealth field flickering. "Status report," HFY commanded. "Stealth generator damaged, Commander," Vexthar replied, confusion evident in his voice. The projectile somehow triggered a resonance in the crystals. The vibrational frequency disrupted my camouflage matrix. HFY stared at the tactical display. He calculated the harmonic frequency of Xerian crystals without instruments. "That's impossible." "Maybe he got lucky," suggested Lieutenant Quindar, though his voice lacked conviction. Kenji was moving now, flowing across the deadly terrain with a grace that seemed to ignore both the increased gravity and the treacherous footing. He approached the nearest crystal formation, placed his hand against it for a moment, then continued toward Vexthar's position. "What is he doing?" HFY muttered. Her answer came as Kenji reached the base of a particularly large crystal spire. He struck it with the palm of his hand, and the entire formation began to resonate with a deep, thrumming vibration that spread through the chamber. "All stealth fields compromised," reported the chief technician. "The vibrational pattern is disrupting electronic camouflage across the entire chamber." Vexthar became fully visible, his adaptive armor struggling to compensate for the harmonic interference. He immediately switched to aggressive assault mode, his plasma projectors charging to full power. "Target acquired," he announced, engaging with lethal force. But when he fired, Kenji was no longer there. The human had seemingly vanished without technological assistance, moving faster than the combat sensors could track. Plasma bolts traced deadly patterns through the air, each one missing its target by impossible margins. "Where is he?" Vexthar's voice carried the first note of panic any of them had ever heard from the veteran operative. The answer came from directly above. Kenji had somehow scaled the chamber's ceiling, moving along the support beams with spider-like agility. He dropped silently behind Vexthar, landing without a sound despite the chamber's increased gravity. Vexthar spun around, bringing his weapons to bear, but found himself face to face with empty air. Kenji had used the moment of the landing to roll behind another crystal formation. "This is ridiculous," Vexthar snarled, switching his weapons to area effect mode. "I'll bring down the entire section." Plasma fire erupted in devastating waves, melting crystal and creating clouds of superheated vapor. When the energy dissipated, a significant portion of the chamber had been reduced to molten slag. Kenji emerged from the destruction completely unharmed. "Ow!" HFY whispered. On the chamber floor, Kenji had somehow predicted the exact pattern of Vexthar's attack and used the melting crystal formations to create temporary shelter. But more than that, he had turned the environmental hazard to his advantage. The superheated vapor created thermal distortions that confused Vexstar's targeting systems. Vexstar, status report, ZYX commanded. Power reserves at 60%. Target continues to evade engagement. Switching to close-quarters combat protocols. Vexstar drew his monomolecular blade, a weapon capable of cutting through molecular bonds. At close range, his superior strength and armor should provide decisive advantage over any primitive opponent. He charged toward Kenji's position, weapon extended, moving with the enhanced speed his bioarmor provided. Kenji waited until the last possible moment, then moved. What happened next defied everything ZYX understood about combat physics. The human didn't simply dodge. He flowed around Vexstar's attack like water around a stone, using the Nexarian's own momentum against him. Somehow, impossibly, Kenji's hands found the exact pressure points where Vexstar's armor segments connected. The bioarmor, designed to withstand energy weapons and kinetic impacts, suddenly locked up completely. Vexstar found himself paralyzed, his own protective system turned against him by precise manipulation of its mechanical components. Armor system failure, he reported, his voice tight with disbelief. All servos locked. I cannot move. Kenji stood beside the immobilized operative, calm and untouched. He looked up at the observation deck, meeting ZYX's gaze through the transparent barrier. Should I continue? He asked, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio system. ZYX realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in Imperial military history. Vexstar, one of their finest warriors, armed with advanced technology and years of combat experience, had been completely neutralized by a primitive human using nothing but physical skill and tactical intelligence. Explain your methods, she demanded. Kenji's response was delivered with the same calm precision he had shown throughout the engagement. Your operative relies heavily on technological advantages. His movement patterns, response times, and tactical decisions are all optimized for fighting opponents with similar equipment and training. He wasn't prepared to face someone who fights by reading environmental cues, predicting behavior patterns, and exploiting mechanical weaknesses. The crystal resonance frequency, ZYX said. How did you calculate it? I listened. The chamber has a natural harmonic when sound waves interact with the crystal matrix. Your stealth technology creates subtle electromagnetic interference that affects those harmonics. I simply introduced a counter-frequency to amplify the effect. Lieutenant Quindar stared at the tactical display. He performed harmonic frequency analysis using only biological senses. Your weapon's targeting, ZYX continued. How did you predict the firing patterns? Your operative's eye movements, body positioning, and weapon alignment all indicated his intended targets. Biological creatures develop patterns when using technological tools. I read the patterns and moved accordingly. And the armor lockup? Kenji touched one of the points where he had struck Vexstar's suit. Mechanical systems have vulnerable junction points where different components interface. Precise impact at the correct angle can cause cascade failures throughout the system. Your armor is sophisticated, but it follows predictable engineering principles. ZYX found herself struggling to process what she had witnessed. Every tactical doctrine, every training protocol, every assumption about the relationship between technology and warfare was being challenged by this single human. Release my operative, she ordered. Kenji touched several points on Vexstar's armor in quick succession, and the Nexarian immediately regained mobility. Vexstar stepped away, his weapon lowered, staring at the human with something approaching respect. Commander, Vexstar reported, I recommend immediate integration of this operative into Imperial Special Forces. His capabilities exceed anything in our current tactical database. ZYX watched as Kenji removed his atmospheric mask, breathing the toxic chamber atmosphere with no apparent difficulty. Even his respiratory system had somehow adapted to conditions that should have been lethal. How many others like you exist? She asked. Kenji's expression remained neutral. Earth has approximately 300 active ninja operatives with comparable training, another 2,000 specialists in related disciplines, and we represent only one tradition among many human combat specializations. The observation deck fell silent. 300. Not one remarkable individual, but an entire cadre of warriors who could potentially outmatch Imperial Special Forces using nothing but primitive training and biological adaptation. What do you want in return for military cooperation? Zuaxthala asked, already knowing that the power dynamic of this negotiation had fundamentally shifted. Recognition of Earth as an equal partner in the Galactic Empire, not a subject species. Technological exchange rather than technological dependence. And the opportunity to demonstrate what humanity can contribute to galactic security. Zuaxthala realized she was no longer conducting a standard integration evaluation. She was negotiating with a species that had just proven they possessed military capabilities the Empire desperately needed to understand and utilize. The question was no longer whether Earth would be accepted into the Empire. The question was whether the Empire was prepared for what that acceptance would mean. The Galactic Empire welcomed Earth's ninja team. The integration 3 months after the demonstration aboard the Eternal Dominion, Commander Zuaxthala found herself in the unprecedented position of establishing the first joint human-imperial military facility in galactic history. The Nexus station, constructed in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, served as both a training facility and a testing ground for integration protocols that defied every precedent in Imperial expansion doctrine. She stood in the main observation bay, watching through reinforced transparent aluminum as human operatives conducted training exercises alongside Imperial Special Forces. The site continued to challenge everything she thought she understood about military hierarchy and technological superiority. Status report on Integration Protocol 7. She requested from her aide, Lieutenant Quindar, who had been assigned as her permanent liaison for the Earth Project. Results continue to exceed projections, Commander, Quindar replied, his tentacles manipulating a holographic display showing combat effectiveness statistics. Human operatives have achieved mission success rates of 93% when paired with Imperial forces, compared to the previous standard of 78% for pure Imperial units. Zuaxthala nodded, though the implications still disturbed her. Explain the tactical advantages demonstrated in yesterday's scenario. The Gorkan Rebellion simulation, ma'am. Imperial forces were tasked with infiltrating a heavily fortified position on Theron 4. Standard approach would have required orbital bombardment, followed by ground assault, estimated casualties at 30% of attacking force. And the joint approach? Human operatives Yuki Tanaka and Marcus Santos infiltrated the position using techniques our sensors couldn't detect. They neutralized critical defensive systems from within, allowing Imperial forces to complete the objective with 0 casualties. The display showed tactical recordings of the exercise. Zuaxthala watched as the two humans moved through what should have been impenetrable defenses like shadows given substance. Laser grids designed to detect molecular movement failed to register their passage. Motion sensors calibrated to Imperial technology standards registered nothing as they slipped past automated weapon systems. Ow, she asked, though she was beginning to understand that this question would become a permanent part of her vocabulary where humans were concerned. According to their after-action report, they used environmental factors we hadn't considered. Thermal updrafts from the facility's power systems created air currents that could mask movement if timed precisely. The laser grid had calibration gaps designed to account for natural phenomena on Theron 4. Dust particles, atmospheric moisture. The humans identified these gaps and moved accordingly. They calculated atmospheric physics in real time without instruments. Apparently so, Commander. Operative Tanaka described it as reading the environment like a language. She said humans developed these abilities because Earth's environments are unpredictable and frequently hostile. Zuaxthala turned from the tactical display to watch the live training session below. Today's exercise involved Kenji Nakamura working with a squad of Phantom Corps operatives on advanced infiltration techniques. The Imperial soldiers, despite their technological advantages, were struggling to keep pace with the humans' seemingly instinctive understanding of stealth mechanics. Commander, the urgent voice belonged to Captain Thrixmore, the Nexarian who had been paralyzed during Kenji's initial demonstration. He had since become one of the most vocal advocates for human integration, though Zuaxthala suspected professional pride played a role in his enthusiasm. Report, Captain. We have a situation on Kepler Station. Insurgent forces have captured the primary communications array. Admiral Vorth AK is requesting immediate assistance from any available special forces. ZYX crystalline features sharpened. Kepler Station controlled communications for an entire sector, including early warning systems for 3 frontier worlds. If insurgents maintained control for more than 48 hours, they could coordinate attacks across multiple systems. Distance to Kepler Station? 18 hours at maximum acceleration. Admiral Vorthke estimates we have 26 hours before insurgent reinforcements arrive. Conventional assault options? Frixmore's expression darkened. The station is heavily fortified, positioned in an asteroid field that prevents effective orbital bombardment. Standard infiltration routes have been compromised. Imperial intelligence estimates 60 to 70% casualties for a frontal assault. ZYX considered the tactical situation. Kepler Station had been designed as an impregnable communications hub with multiple redundant defense systems and choke point architecture that favored defenders. Under normal circumstances, she would request additional fleet support and accept the casualties as necessary costs. But these were no longer normal circumstances. Summon Nakamura and his team, she ordered, and prepare the Eternal Dominion for immediate departure. 6 hours later, ZYX stood in the ship's briefing room, facing an assembly that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Imperial officers sat alongside human operatives, studying tactical projections of Kepler Station with equal professional interest. Kenji occupied a seat at the center of the human delegation, flanked by 5 other specialists whose files read like catalogs of impossible accomplishments. Yuki Tanaka, demolitions expert with a preference for improvised explosives created from environmental materials. Marcus Santos, reconnaissance specialist capable of remaining undetected in hostile territory for weeks without technological support. Elena Volkov, close-quarters combat expert whose kill count approached Kenji's own impressive numbers. Situation assessment. ZYX began, activating the holographic display. Kepler Station, current status compromised. Insurgent forces estimated at 40 to 50 combatants, unknown species composition, armed with Imperial-grade weapons and equipment. The display showed the station's complex architecture, multiple levels connected by narrow corridors, critical systems distributed throughout the structure, and defensive positions that commanded every approach route. Standard assault protocols estimate 7 to 10 hours of combat, significant casualties, potential damage to critical communications equipment, she continued. Admiral Vorth AK requires rapid resolution with minimal system disruption. Captain Frixmore leaned forward. Commander, with respect, this is exactly the type of scenario where human capabilities could prove decisive. Their infiltration methods bypass our conventional tactical assumptions. Kenji studied the holographic representation, his dark eyes tracking movement patterns and defensive positions with the intensity of a predator analyzing prey. What's the insurgent command structure? Unknown. They've maintained communication silence since initial seizure. Security systems status? All automated defenses remain active. Insurgents appear to have isolated specific sections rather than attempting full system control. Kenji nodded slowly. They're not trying to hold the station permanently. This is a disruption operation with a specific timeline. Lieutenant Quindar consulted his tactical display. How do you determine that from available intelligence? Their approach to security systems. Yuki Tanaka interjected, her accent carrying traces of her Japanese heritage. If they intended permanent occupation, they would have disabled automated defenses completely. Instead, they're working around them, which means they plan to extract before Imperial reinforcements arrive. Marcus Santos pointed to several locations on the tactical display. These choke points aren't being held in depth. They're establishing delay positions, not permanent fortifications. Classic extraction with denial tactics. ZYX watched the human operatives analyze the situation with methods that differed fundamentally from Imperial tactical doctrine. Where her officers focused on technological capabilities and force ratios, the humans read intention and behavior patterns from enemy actions. Proposed solution? She asked. Kenji exchanged glances with his team, and ZYX realized they were communicating through subtle signals she couldn't interpret. Micro-expressions, slight gestures, positioning adjustments. They operated with coordination that rivaled her most experienced units despite having no technological enhancement. Three-phase approach, Kenji said finally. Phase 1. Infiltration during their night cycle. Establish positions inside their security perimeter. Phase 2. Simultaneous disruption of their command and control while Imperial forces create external pressure. Phase 3. Coordinated elimination of remaining resistance. Timeline: 4 hours maximum. Probably less. The briefing room fell silent. Imperial tactical doctrine for this type of assault typically required days of preparation and expected hours of sustained combat. Explain the approach, Zywajstala ordered. Elena Volkov activated a section of the holographic display. Their security focus is external, watching for Imperial ships and preventing communications with the outside. They're not prepared for threats that originate from inside their perimeter. How do you get inside their perimeter? We don't go around their security, Marcus Santos explained. We go through it. Insurgents are using captured Imperial equipment, which means they're operating within Imperial tactical paradigms. They're watching for threats that match their expected patterns. Yuki Tanaka highlighted several points on the station schematic. Maintenance conduits, atmosphere processing vents, waste disposal systems. Infrastructure they're not monitoring because Imperial doctrine doesn't consider them viable infiltration routes. Those passages are too small for effective movement, objected Captain Thrixmore. For someone in standard armor, yes, Kenji agreed. But human physiology allows for significantly greater flexibility. We can navigate spaces that would be impossible for most Imperial species. Zywajstala studied the proposed infiltration routes. The humans intended to use service passages barely large enough for a single person, crawl through ventilation systems designed for atmospheric flow rather than personnel movement, and emerge inside defended positions without triggering any security measures. Once inside, classic disruption tactics, Elena Volkov said. Eliminate sentries silently, create confusion about the source of threats, force them to divide their attention between internal and external security. When they start responding to internal threats, they'll expose their positions to Imperial assault forces. You're proposing to create chaos from within while Imperial forces attack from without. Coordinated pressure from multiple vectors, Kenji confirmed. They've prepared for siege tactics, not simultaneous internal and external assault. Zywajstala considered the proposal. Everything about it violated standard Imperial military doctrine. Infiltration through impossible routes, coordination without technological communication, assault timing based on behavioral prediction rather than tactical calculation. It was exactly the kind of approach that had proven devastatingly effective in every previous engagement involving human operatives. Authorized, she decided. Deployment in 14 hours. Captain Thrixmore, coordinate Imperial assault elements with human infiltration timeline. As the briefing concluded and officers dispersed to preparation duties, Zywajstala found herself alone with Kenji and his team. The humans remained seated, studying the tactical display with quiet intensity. Question, she said. Your confidence in this approach, is it based on analysis or intuition? Kenji looked up from the holographic station schematic. Both. Analysis tells us their tactical weaknesses and optimal approach vectors. Intuition tells us how they'll respond when the situation develops beyond their planning parameters. And if your intuition proves incorrect, then we adapt. Human military doctrine emphasizes flexibility over technological superiority. We're trained to succeed when plans fail and equipment breaks. Zywajstala nodded slowly. Commander's evaluation. Proceed with Operation Silent Thunder. All units, prepare for departure. As she left the briefing room, Zywajstala reflected on the transformation that had occurred since Earth's first contact. The Galactic Empire had welcomed humanity as junior partners, expecting to guide and direct their development according to standard integration protocols. Instead, they had discovered a species that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare, tactics, and the relationship between technology and military effectiveness. The question was no longer whether humans could contribute to Imperial military capability. The question was whether the Empire was prepared to learn from teachers who fought with methods that predated spaceflight by thousands of years. Hashtag the Galactic Empire welcomed Earth's ninja team. The mission, the Eternal Dominion, dropped out of hyperspace 18 hours later at the edge of the Kepler system, immediately activating stealth protocols to avoid detection. Through the main view screen, HFY could see the communication station floating in the asteroid field like a metallic spider web stretched between massive rock formations. Sensor sweep complete, reported her navigation officer. Station appears intact. No visible damage to external systems. Insurgent vessel status? 2 ships docked at primary airlocks. Configuration matches stolen Imperial Patrol craft designations Meridian and Astral Dawn. No indication they've detected our presence. HFY studied the tactical display showing Kepler Station's position relative to the surrounding asteroids. The insurgents had chosen their target well. The station's location made conventional assault nearly impossible while providing multiple escape routes through the asteroid field. Human team status? She asked. Lieutenant Quindar consulted his monitoring station. Infiltration team reports ready for deployment. They've completed equipment checks and final briefing. Equipment checks, HFY reflected with continuing amazement, consisted primarily of ensuring the humans had their traditional tools, blade weapons that appeared primitive by Imperial standards, climbing equipment that seemed inadequate for space operations, and communication devices no more sophisticated than basic audio transmitters. The humans had politely declined most Imperial technology, explaining that unfamiliar equipment would interfere with techniques refined over centuries of Earth-based operations. They trusted their methods more than advanced tools they hadn't mastered. "Bring me visual on the infiltration team," she ordered. The view screen shifted to show the Eternal Dominion's auxiliary launch bay. 6 humans floated in zero gravity, dressed in their characteristic black outfits modified with minimal life support systems. They moved with the same fluid grace and microgravity that they had demonstrated in every other environment, as if physical laws were suggestions rather than absolute constraints. Kenji rotated slowly, checking the seal on his atmospheric recycler, then spoke into his communicator. "Command, infiltration team, ready for deployment. Requesting final authorization." "Authorized," HFY replied. "Launch when ready. Imperial assault forces will commence external pressure in 90 minutes. Understood. Beginning approach." The humans activated small maneuvering thrusters, far less sophisticated than Imperial individual flight systems, but apparently adequate for their purposes. They moved toward Kepler Station in formation, using asteroid cover to mask their approach from sensor detection. HFY transferred to the Tactical Observation Center, where she could monitor the operation through multiple sensor systems and maintain communication with both human and Imperial units. "Infiltration team approaching station perimeter," reported Yuki Tanaka. Visual confirmation of external security measures. Laser detection grid active, motion sensors operational, automated defense turrets tracking standard approach vectors. "Proceed as planned," Kenji responded. What followed challenged every principle of space-based infiltration that HFY had learned during her military career. Instead of attempting to disable or circumvent security systems, the humans simply ignored them. Marcus Santos approached a service hatch designed for maintenance drones, approximately half the size required for normal personnel access. Somehow, impossibly, he managed to compress his body and equipment enough to fit through the opening without triggering proximity alarms or pressure sensors. "How is that possible?" whispered Captain Thrixmore, watching from beside HFY. "That access port is 15 centimeters in diameter. Human skeletal structure includes more flexible joints than most Imperial species," Lieutenant Quindar explained, though his voice carried the same disbelief. "But this exceeds our projections for human physiological limits." Elena Volkov followed Santos through a different access point, this one an atmosphere processing vent that should have been impossible to navigate due to active air circulation systems. She somehow timed her movement to work with the airflow rather than against it, using the station's own environmental systems to assist her infiltration. One by one, all 6 humans disappeared into Kepler Station through openings that Imperial doctrine considered completely secure against intrusion. "Internal sensor contact," HFY asked her sensor technician. "Negative, Commander." Station's internal security grid shows no unauthorized personnel, but we just watched them enter the facility. Yes, ma'am. Somehow, they're avoiding detection by systems designed to register any biological presence larger than maintenance fauna. ZYXTALA found herself gripping the observation rail with enough force to leave crystalline scratches in the metal. Every operation involving human forces produced this same cognitive dissonance, watching them accomplish impossible objectives through methods that defied rational analysis. Infiltration team, status report, she requested. Kenji's voice came through the communicator with perfect clarity, showing no signs of stress or exertion. Internal positions established. Beginning reconnaissance of insurgent disposition and security measures. For 30 minutes, ZYXTALA monitored communications as the human team moved through Kepler Station like ghosts with substance. They reported enemy positions, weapon placements, patrol patterns, and defensive preparations with precision that exceeded Imperial intelligence capabilities. More disturbing, they accomplished this surveillance without triggering a single security alert. The insurgents remained completely unaware that their position had been compromised. 43 insurgents confirmed, reported Marcus Santos. Mixed species composition, 21 Corthani, 15 Nexarians, 7 Vex High. Standard Imperial weapons and armor, but modified with non-standard equipment I don't recognize. Mercenary upgrades, suggested Captain Thrixmore. Black market modifications designed to enhance combat effectiveness. Command structure identified, added Elena Volkov. Primary command post in Section C7, communications control in Section 12, weapons storage in Section D4. They've distributed critical functions to prevent single-point failure. ZYXTALA studied the tactical display as human operatives updated enemy positions in real time. The insurgents had established a defense in depth that would require significant Imperial forces to overcome through conventional assault. Kenji, assessment of internal assault feasibility? Confirmed feasible. Insurgent security focus remains external. They're prepared for siege tactics, not internal disruption. Requesting coordination with Imperial assault timeline. Imperial forces report ready for external pressure operations, announced Lieutenant Quindar. Admiral Vorthe K. requests confirmation that internal disruption will commence simultaneously with external assault. Affirmative, Kenji replied. Beginning Phase 2 in 60 seconds. Recommend Imperial forces initiate external pressure at that mark. ZYXTALA opened communication with Admiral Vorthe K. Admiral, commence assault operations on human team's mark. Coordination protocols as briefed. Acknowledged, ZYXTALA. Standing by. The next few minutes redefined ZYXTALA's understanding of military coordination. Without technological enhancement, quantum communication, or sophisticated command systems, the human operatives synchronized their actions with precision that rivaled Imperial Special Forces. Mark, announced Kenji. Simultaneously, 6 locations throughout Kepler Station erupted into chaos. Yuki Tanaka's demolition charges disabled the primary communications array with surgical precision, cutting insurgent coordination without damaging critical Imperial equipment. Marcus Santos eliminated 3 sentries in rapid succession, their bodies discovered only when patrols failed to report in. Elena Volkov's assault on the weapons storage facility created explosions that suggested major external attack, while actually destroying insurgent ammunition supplies. External assault commencing, reported Admiral Vorthe. Imperial forces engaging insurgent defensive positions. From the insurgents' perspective, they were suddenly under attack from all directions simultaneously. Internal sabotage suggested infiltration impossible to detect, while external pressure indicated Imperial forces had somehow penetrated their asteroid field defenses. Insurgent communications, traffic spiking, reported the sensor technician. Multiple distress signals, coordination attempts failing due to destroyed equipment. Enemy response patterns? ZYXTALA asked. Panic, replied Kenji, his voice carrying through blaster fire and explosion sounds. They're responding to threats instead of implementing coordinated defense. Classic breakdown of command and control under unexpected pressure. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was systematic dismantlement of organized resistance by forces that operated beyond the insurgents' ability to comprehend or counter. Human operatives moved through defended positions like natural disasters, striking without warning and vanishing before effective response could be organized. Imperial forces, coordinated by human intelligence and supported by internal disruption, advanced through defensive lines that collapsed faster than insurgents could reorganize. Section C. 7 Command Post Neutralized, reported Elena Volkov. Insurgent command structure eliminated. Section D. For weapons storage secured, added Yuki Tanaka. All heavy equipment destroyed or captured. Remaining insurgent forces retreating to docked vessels, observed Marcus Santos. 17 survivors, no longer organized as effective fighting unit. Total operation time, 2 hours and 37 minutes. Imperial casualties, 0. Station damage, minimal, limited to areas specifically targeted by human operatives. Communications equipment, intact and operational. Admiral Vorthe K. Status report. ZYXDALA requested. Station secured, Commander. Insurgent forces neutralized or captured. How did your people accomplish internal penetration without triggering any security measures? ZYXDALA looked at the tactical display, showing human operatives now moving openly through station corridors. Their stealth approach abandoned now. The concealment was unnecessary. I'm still trying to understand that myself, Admiral. As Imperial forces secured Kepler Station and restored normal operations, ZYXDALA found herself reviewing combat recordings that documented the complete transformation of military engagement through human integration. Every tactical assumption, every security protocol, every defensive measure had proved inadequate against opponents who fought using methods the Empire had never encountered. The insurgents hadn't been defeated by superior firepower or advanced technology. They had been outmatched by warriors who moved unseen, struck without warning, and coordinated through instincts refined across thousands of years of Earth-based warfare. Commander, Captain Thrixmore approached with an expression of professional respect mixed with genuine confusion. Request permission to #the Galactic Empire welcomed Earth's ninja team. The revelation 6 months after the Kepler Station operation, Commander ZYXDALA received an emergency transmission that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the known galaxy. She stood in her private quarters aboard the Eternal Dominion, reviewing intelligence reports that had arrived through the most secure Imperial communication channels. The message was brief, but devastating. Unknown hostile forces have eliminated 3 frontier colonies. Imperial fleets dispatched to investigate have ceased communication. Request immediate deployment of all available special forces to Sector 7 Alpha for emergency response. ZYXDALA's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display showing the affected region. 3 entire worlds had gone silent within the span of 72 hours. More troubling, 2 full Imperial battle fleets had vanished without sending distress signals or combat reports. Lieutenant Quindar, she called through the ship's communication system. Her aide materialized on the holographic projector, his tentacles writhing with obvious anxiety. Yes, Commander. Assemble senior staff and the human liaison team. Emergency briefing in 20 minutes. Priority Alpha protocols. Understood, Commander. Should I notify Admiral Vorthe? Negative. This briefing is classified above Admiral clearance level. 20 minutes later, ZYXDALA faced an assembly that represented the most unusual military unit in Imperial history. Imperial officers sat alongside human operatives, their combined expertise spanning centuries of conventional warfare and millennia of adaptive combat techniques. Situation assessment. She began activating the secure holographic display. At 0347 Standard Imperial Time, Colony World Tertius went silent. No distress signals. No communication anomalies. Complete communications blackout. Initial response fleet arrived at Tertius 12 hours later and reported unusual sensor readings before losing contact. The display showed tactical positions for the missing fleets, their last known coordinates, and projected approach vectors to the affected systems. Similar pattern repeated at colonies Septimus and Decimus. 3 fleets dispatched, 3 fleets vanished. Total personnel lost. Approximately 47,000 Imperial military, plus unknown civilian casualties. Captain Thrixmore leaned forward. Weapons signatures? Debris fields? Any indication of the attacking force's capabilities? None. Deep-range sensors detect no energy signatures, no ship movements, no indication of conventional warfare. The affected systems appear completely normal except for the absence of any biological activity. Kenji had been studying the tactical display in silence, his expression growing progressively more serious. Commander, may I ask about the timing of these incidents? Explain your question. The interval between attacks. Tertius, then Septimus, then Decimus. What was the time progression? ZYXThala consulted her data. Tertius, total silence achieved in approximately 4 hours. Septimus, 2 hours. Decimus, 47 minutes. They're learning, Yuki Tanaka said quietly. Each attack is more efficient than the last. Learning what? Asked Lieutenant Quindar. Marcus Santos pointed to the tactical display. Imperial response patterns, fleet disposition, defensive capabilities. Someone is studying Imperial military doctrine and adapting their methods accordingly. Elena Volkov highlighted several points on the star chart. Look at the target selection. These aren't random attacks. These colonies are isolated enough to delay Imperial response, but strategically significant enough to force major fleet deployment. ZYXThala felt a chill run through her crystalline bones. You're suggesting this is a systematic intelligence-gathering operation disguised as random attacks. More than that, Kenji said, his voice carrying a note of certainty that always preceded his most disturbing insights. This is someone testing Imperial capabilities before launching a larger operation. They're not trying to hold territory. They're learning how to defeat Imperial forces efficiently. But who could accomplish fleet-level elimination without leaving evidence? Captain Thrixmore asked. No known species possesses technology that advanced. Maybe they're not using technology, suggested Yuki Tanaka. The briefing room fell silent. Every Imperial officer understood the implications of that statement, but none wanted to voice them. Impossible, Lieutenant Quindar said finally. Fleet-level elimination requires massive firepower or extremely sophisticated weapons. You can't destroy starships without technology. Kenji exchanged glances with his team, and ZYXThala recognized the subtle communication patterns she had learned to interpret over months of joint operations. Commander, Kenji said carefully, may I ask about Imperial Fleet defensive protocols when approaching potentially hostile systems? Standard approach, long-range sensor sweep, fighter screen deployment, main battle line, maintaining safe distance until threat assessment complete. And if no threats are detected, advance to optimal orbital position for ground operations or investigation. Marcos Santos nodded suavely. They close to engagement range before realizing they're under attack. But our sensors would detect any attacking force, protested Captain Thrixmore. Imperial detection systems monitor across all known spectrums. All known Imperial spectrums, Elena Volkov corrected. What if the attacking force uses methods Imperial sensors aren't designed to detect? ZYXThala stared at the human operatives, understanding beginning to dawn with horrible clarity. You think these attacks are being conducted using stealth techniques similar to your own? Possibly, Kenji replied. But on a scale we've never imagined possible. Explain. Human ninja techniques work because they operate outside the parameters enemy forces expect. We move through spaces considered impossible, attack from directions considered secure, and eliminate targets using methods considered impossible. You're saying an entire species has developed similar capabilities? Or, Yuki Tanaka said quietly, a species has been studying our techniques and scaling them up to fleet engagement level. The implications hit ZYXThala like a physical blow. For 6 months, the Empire had been training with human operatives, learning their methods, documenting their capabilities. If that intelligence had been compromised, Lieutenant Quindar, immediate security scan of all communications related to human integration protocols. Priority Alpha clearance. Yes, Commander. Captain Thrixmore, review all personnel with access to human training operations. Cross-reference with any individuals who have had contact with Sector 7 Alpha regions. As her staff dispersed to investigative duties, ZYXThala found herself alone with the human team. They sat in silence, studying the tactical display with expressions that mixed professional interest with growing concern. Kenji, she said finally, hypothetical assessment. If a hostile force had access to human stealth techniques and Imperial technology, what would be their optimal strategy for fleet engagement? Kenji considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. Infiltration rather than confrontation. Get inside Imperial defensive perimeters using stealth methods our sensors can't detect. Disable key systems from within. Eliminate command and control before Imperial forces realize they're under attack. Elimination methods? Depends on their objectives. If they want ships intact, targeted elimination of crew. If they want to prevent Imperial analysis, complete destruction using Imperial systems against themselves. ZYX activated the display, showing the timeline of fleet disappearances. Duration from initial contact to complete silence, steadily decreasing. What does that suggest about their capabilities? They're perfecting their technique, Elena Volkov said. First attack, they learned Imperial fleet structure and defensive patterns. Second attack, they refined their infiltration methods. Third attack, they achieved optimal efficiency. Which means Marcus Santos met her gaze directly. They're ready for the main operation. Everything so far has been practice. Before ZYX could respond, her communication system activated with an emergency priority signal. Commander ZYX, this is Admiral Vorthake. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet movement in Sector 7 Alpha. Configuration unknown, estimated size. Commander, preliminary count suggests over 3,000 vessels of unknown design. ZYX blood turned to ice in her veins. Direction of movement. Toward the core worlds, Commander. Estimated time to Imperial Central Command, 72 hours. Any response from intercepted fleets? Negative. No communication, no engagement, no deviation from course. They're moving through Imperial space as if our defensive fleets don't exist. ZYX turned to Kenji and his team. Assessment. They've learned everything they needed to know about Imperial military capabilities, Kenji said grimly. Now, they're applying that knowledge on a scale that could eliminate Imperial resistance before you realize you're under attack. Recommendations? Contact Earth immediately. If this enemy has studied our techniques, the only effective counter will come from people who understand those techniques better than anyone else. I mean the Empire is about to face an enemy that fights like humans. The only way to defeat that enemy is with more humans fighting using methods they haven't studied yet. ZYX realized that the galaxy had changed fundamentally in the past 6 months. The Empire had welcomed Earth as junior partners, expecting to guide their development according to established protocols. Instead, they had inadvertently revealed their own military doctrine to an enemy that could use human techniques against Imperial forces with devastating effectiveness. The question was no longer whether humans could contribute to Imperial security. The question was whether humanity could save the Empire from an enemy that had learned to fight like humans while retaining all the advantages of advanced technology. Open emergency communication to Earth Command, ZYX ordered. Priority Alpha Alpha. Message begins. The Empire requires immediate military assistance from all available human forces. We are facing an enemy that fights using your methods. Request deployment of every ninja operative, special forces specialist, and unconventional warfare expert Earth can provide. And if Earth refuses? Asked Lieutenant Quindar. ZYX looked at Kenji and his team, warriors who had redefined everything she thought she understood about combat effectiveness through nothing but skill, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to mission success. Then, the Galactic Empire falls, and humanity becomes the last free species in the galaxy. The realization that humans might represent the galaxy's final hope against annihilation was perhaps the most humbling moment in Imperial history. The species they had welcomed as junior partners might be the only force capable of preventing total galactic conquest. The irony was not lost on ZYX. The Empire had been saved once by learning human techniques. Now they needed to be saved again by humans who knew techniques the Empire had never imagined that established formal training protocols with human operatives. Our special forces need to understand these capabilities. Granted, ZYX replied, still studying the tactical recordings. But, Captain, I'm beginning to suspect we're not learning human techniques. We're learning an entirely different philosophy of warfare. Meaning, Commander? Meaning the Empire has been fighting wars with technology for so long that we've forgotten how to fight wars with intelligence, adaptation, and pure skill. She paused, watching replay footage of Kenji eliminating 4 armed insurgents using nothing but precise knowledge of anatomy and perfect timing. The question is whether we're prepared to learn from teachers whose methods our own doctrine considers impossible.